Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison. I'm back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. Amanda, you know something a little bit about that. But before we get there, let's talk about a couple things I have going on. Number one, my book, Finding Your Summit, there it is out on Amazon. That's cool. What's super cool is that it just came out on audible.com. So now you can move, you can walk, you can learn, and you can listen. Those are the things you can do if you want to. Finding Your Summit on Audible. You don't get the cool pictures, but it's a great way to read the book, be inspired, and remember, a lot of it is about the faith and the resilience that you need to have to overcome those peaks and valleys that we all go through. Okay. I'm out on the speaking circuit. I just got back from Montenegro. I just got back from doing a TEDx. And so if you want me to come in and light up your organization, come to my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com. All right. On that note, let's get into my amazing guest today, Amanda Gunville. How you doing?
I'm awesome, especially after hearing all of that exciting stuff you have going on.
I've got a lot of stuff going on. I always have a lot I love being busy and I love getting after it. And to me, that's so much about what life is. Okay, so you've got this interesting background. I want to jump into it and, kind of what jumps out. And actually, Lee Steinberg has been on this podcast, but kind of where you cut your teeth and what we're going to get into about, what you're trying to launch today really stems back 20 years ago when you went to work for Lee Steinberg Sports organization. So tell me a little bit about that and what you learned.
Absolutely. Well, I was very fortunate that I was introduced to Lee Steinberg's firm. I was working for ESPN and Fox Sports, and his business partner happened to be Warren Moon, and I was his stage manager. So I ended up interning for Lee to start, just right at the very bottom of that totem pole, and worked my tail off. But what was so interesting is that not only did I get the opportunity to start my career with him, I like to say that Lee gave me a PhD in sports business because there were pretty much every day where I was always the last person in the office, and Lee would work out in the office. And at the end of the day, he would come in and he would say, Amanda, come in the office. And we would walk through the entire day, why he did what he did, what was important, what do the clients need. And so, what I thought was so valuable for him as my mentor was that he would take that time to really explain to me why we were doing the things that we were doing and how we could impact the most lives we could.
Yeah, so again, Lee has been on this show, and it's no secret, and he talked about it publicly about all his different struggles that he went through, mainly with alcohol and those things. But at one point in time, he was the guy. I think there might have been 7 or 8 years. You guys had the number one pick in the draft, like the Troy Aikmans of the world. And of course, I go way back with Warren Moon. Warren and I played at the same school, University of Washington, together. And Warren, I think, might have been 5 or 6 years older than me. So, certainly he was in and out before I ever got to the UW. But, over time, because I was a receiver and he was a quarterback, we'd go out and we'd throw the ball all the time when he was still playing and I was playing. So I got to know him through that. One of the things that was really cool, and it is part of your story, is this whole, the movie Jerry Maguire was really inspired by. I love the movie, right? I love the movie for so many different reasons. Not only is it just a great movie, but it's also about football. It's about the sports business. And I went through all those different things that I can't remember the football player guy but that was me, right? I went to the combines, I had all the agents around, I did all that kind of stuff. So what was it like for you? And I don't know what the answer is here, but what was it like for you to be sort of a part of that at some level, like people coming around or being involved with the making of that movie and all that? I mean, because it truly was. And I know, I think if I remember, Lee has a small little cameo with he and Troy Aikman at the very end of the movie or somewhere in there.
He does. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, people always ask me the same question. They say, "Oh, were you Renee Zellweger?" And I said,
Uh,
"That movie came out when I was in junior high, so
yeah,
no."
yeah,
But, it was the aftermath that really catapulted the agency into that mainstream, not only just within the sports world, but within entertainment. And Jerry Maguire was just one of the many films that Lee and the firm consulted on for the love of the game, Any Given Sunday. So
Yeah.
there was the agency was so different in that we not only represented the creme de la creme of athletes across multiple sports, not just the NFL, but also we had incredible business opportunities, entertainment deals that would come through the door. And my role was always to be the one who took a look at those things first before they got to Lee's desk. And that was just my first, time with him. I've worked with Lee off and on for over 20 years. I just was thinking about it. I'm like, we're coming up on our 25th anniversary of collaborating on, I don't even know, hundreds of projects at this point. So it was a really exciting time because when you become mainstream, when Tom Cruise plays you,
Yeah.
it's amazing the amount of opportunities and exposure that you get across all things business, not just sports.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's incredible. And when I had interviewed, I was down in Newport Beach at his office there. I'm sure you've been in it. And it seemed like after kind of fading out, he has now come back into the picture. His main client, I think, is Patrick Mahomes. Uh, and certainly that has been being in the right place at the right time with the right guy who's really catapulted not only himself, but the NFL, along with the quarterback, of course, of the Kansas City Chiefs. But it seems like he's trying to make a comeback there with it's a smaller office and he's got his little Jerry Maguires out there, but it was cool to see, part of the comeback story, that
Yeah.
that he's part of. So it seems like he's definitely, has turned his life and his story around to really, again, kind of what this show is about, overcoming adversity and finding their way.
Yeah. Well, he's the poster boy of that. I mean, if you can imagine over 25 years, I have seen a massive transformation in a human. And, you go from being the top of the top of the top, and then, as it's very publicly known, as you said, there's this big crash, and then fighting your way back. And I was a part of the team when we first were relaunching the agency, and then this 5 years later, when we got Patrick Mahomes as a client, I was with him at that draft day, and I don't think anybody really realized the gem that Patrick was at the time. So when he went so early, it was almost like an inside joke at the firm. Like we knew how special he was, right? But maybe the rest of the world didn't know, and people were questioning it on some level. But it has been really fun to see Lee move from, this guy who went 100 million miles an hour to now taking a step back and saying, not that he always was concerned about making a lasting impact. That was always a part of the forefront of his entire practice, but now really getting into like health and wellness and, his book with the comeback, obviously. I mean, he has so many cool projects that he's a part of, and just to see him move into this fourth quarter of life with
Mhm.
such grace and humility and the same insanely intelligent human that he's always been is it's really fun to witness.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So, uh, you work there roughly 20 plus years, right? And then life hits all of us, right? And sometimes it punches you right in the face. Just when you least expect it, here it comes. And I've had mine, right? And again, finding your summit, all about overcoming adversity and finding your way. And again, I'm not quite sure what the context in terms of time was, but you your adversity that you had to face was going to the doctor and finding out that you had breast cancer, and now you got to deal with that. So let's
Mhm.
jump into that. And the great news about anybody who's listening to this podcast right now is that there's a happy ending, at the end of this. So that's the good news. But I want to go back into because I can't imagine like any kind of cancer that anybody would get when you go to the doctor, and if there's something that like, hey, what's that? and you come back and you just go in like any other day, and then you come out like your whole life gets shifted in a mega way. So let's
Yeah.
get into that.
Yeah, well, time frame was 3.5 years ago. And at the time, so my entire career has not been just with Lee. I've started a bunch of companies. I've been an executive. And at the time, 3.5 years ago, I was a brand new mom. My baby was only 15 months old. I was the CEO or COO and CMO of a thriving company that we had built from 0 to 7 figures in less than 3 years. So things were crazy, and it just so happened that I was standing in the middle of SoFi Stadium, which, as you know, is LA's NFL stadium,
Hmm.
and I get a phone call. Now, I was expecting the phone call, so I stepped away and I said hello. And they said, "This is Dr. B. Amanda, I'm sorry, we have your results. You have cancer." And Mark, it was like that moment in the action movies where the bomb goes off and like everything goes silent and there's just that loud ringing
Yeah.
noise. And that's was my experience. I, of course, immediately flew home. At the time I was living in Colorado, and that week your life just spirals. And I'll never forget, I had my brother came over, and he is a pediatric intensive care unit doctor, and I know your history with your daughter. You've had a fair number of conversations with physicians like him. So he's an expert, unfortunately, at having those really tough conversations. And I was on a walk with him, and I said, "Brother, I know that I need to be positive. Like, I know that I need to just, it's all mindset, and that's going to really help me get through this." But I said, there is a dark cloud over my head. I can't even look at my daughter without just crying. And I was just crying nonstop. And he said the most impactful thing to me in that moment. He said, "Sister, I hear you." He said, "But give yourself some grace." He said, "You've just been handed a terrible hand of cards.
Yeah.
Feel all the bad things. Let yourself process all the bad things." And that, Mark, is when I realized that before we can talk about the things that we talk about in both of our books, which is that resilience, the fight, the overcoming of whatever those challenges are, we have to acknowledge where we are today. We have to cry the tears and sit in the fear and feel the anger. You have to do that as a human so that you can then show up authentically. And for me, my next step was, okay, I've moved through some of those emotions, not saying that they are now gone, but what's the next step? And for me, it was saying, what is this challenge? What is this disease here to teach me? And that's what I carried with me for the next 2.5 years was, I mean, it was brutal, but it was why is this happening to me in all the good ways? How can I figure out how to make this the best thing that could have ever happened to me based on who I'm about to become?
Yeah. And when you're in a situation like that and you're saying, what are all these great things that are going to come out of that, right? And now that this is then, right? So this goes back 2 or 3 years, and it's easy to talk about that now because you've
Of course.
overcome this. But at the time, what are you saying to yourself about what those great things are going to be?
Yeah. Well, here's what I learned, Mark, is that joy is not what comes after the fight. So often people write books, give TEDx talks, whatever, and they talk about all of my life was terrible. I was at rock bottom, and then and then I won the fight, and now I have this immense amount of joy. And what I learned for me was that I ended up using joy as kind of the weapon that I used to get through my battle. And the eye-opening thing that happened to me was right after my first chemo, I knew my hair was going to fall out. And so I was like, all right, I'm not going to have that moment with the hair just going everywhere. I'm going to shave
Um,
it. And so I had this like vision in my head of, mohawks and cool lightning streaks, let's do this right. So I recruited my husband who's bald, and and he's got a ton of practice, but turns out practicing on your own head is not the same as someone else's. So what happened was I ended up getting what looked like a half crop circle and more like a map of like a farmland.
Yeah.
And instead of being really upset about it, we started laughing hysterically. I mean, it was one of the most, impactful moments of a woman's life to
Yeah.
shave all your hair off knowing it's all going to fall out. And what I realized in that moment was that the situation didn't change. I was sick as a dog. It was in pain, it was nausea, every side effect. But that moment was this moment of like lightness. And if I could just start to notice even the littlest things in my life, that I could use those as a way to help me get through the hard days because they were there a lot. And so, and it really didn't have to be huge things like shaving your head and laughing hysterically at it. It could be little things like someone pays you a compliment or you pay them a compliment. It could be, someone does a kind gesture, somebody sent me a funny text or anything that made me laugh. And like really embracing, because it's okay to experience joy and laughter even in the midst of your biggest challenge. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that people don't always accept. They're like, oh, this horrible thing I'm going through, which doesn't have to be cancer. It could be divorce. It could be, challenging kid things. It could be anything. And you think, oh, my life is so hard right now. I have to just dig into that hard thing and I can't have any fun. It's like, no, let those things shine even brighter during the challenges because they're going to feel that much sweeter when you get
Yeah.
to experience them.
Yeah. So what part of this in the formula? Because I think a lot of it for all of us, and you kind of said it right now, which is the perspective, right? So what you're going through for you, yes, it was awful, but I've had a whole lot of people on this podcast, and you're like podcast number 300, okay? And I've had some people that were burned from head to, like 98% of their body, and they've lost their arms, and they were in a wrestling accident. I mean, like the list goes on and on and on. And like the perspective of like, well, at least I don't have that, right?
Mhm.
To sometimes I'm only talking about me, like the way I sometimes try to like mentally process certain things when negative things are going on in my life, right? Because if you just take a step back and as much as you're not trying to compare your situation with anybody else because it's real for you and what you're going through, but I'd rather be like deal with that than maybe have, been blown up in Iraq, right? And you don't have three out of the four limbs, right? Or something. And at least for your situation, even though it was tough, you still had a potential way out, right? That possibility existed, and that is kind of what, and that's kind of a lot of times what I lean into is what's the positive grain of out of this acorn that I'm holding that might help me mentally. And then the other thing, and I'm asking this as a question to you. Did you also not only like feel what you're feeling in the moment, but also start to like, what is the path out? What is the solution? What is that, right? Because that helps you, gives you some kind of hope, which everybody's hanging on how this is going to resolve itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I had a really different experience. So sadly, my very best friend from college and into our 20s got breast cancer and didn't make it. So she passed away right before my daughter was born.
Yeah.
So in my mind, cancer meant death
Yeah.
when I was diagnosed. So that was scary. And it's not even remotely close to the overall statistics, but in my mind, N equals one, N equals, or cancer equals
Yeah.
death. And so that to answer your question of like, how do you break free from that? I'd say I had two things. One is, well, three things. One is that I received great advice from my business coach at the time that said, you need to tell people what you need because everyone's going to want to help you, but they're not going to know what to do. They're going to be afraid to say the wrong thing, etc. So be very clear about your needs. And so that was step number one is just saying, and I put like a social, I actually put a social media post out there, and which wasn't at the time a big social media person. I was just like, I need all the good news. I just need to get my mind right. And so, tell me funny things, tell me your kids got an A on their test. I don't care. Just give me all the good stuff. So that was like kind of a little mindset shift, number one. Number two, I read the book The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, life changing, absolute life changing. I read it on, listened to it, like your
Mhm.
Audible book. I can't wait
Yeah.
to listen to it too. And I landed on after a plane flight, and I felt like I had a new like destination in life. Like this was not the end of me. This was the beginning of me. This was my pivot, and this was going to be the best thing that ever happened. I just have to figure out how. And then third was I got into meditation, and I was introduced to Dr. Joe Dispenza and all of his work. And what I loved about it was that it wasn't just, just the woo-woo stuff. There's actual clinical studies done, brain mapping and blood tests and all kinds of things that clinically show the power of meditation. So I was like, all right, I'm on this war path to survive because I have a 15-month-old and I did not want to leave her without a mother. That was my drive. That was my number one goal was that how dare I be so selfish to bring a child into this world and leave her without a mother. That was just me. I'm not saying that's the global truth, but for me, that's the way I felt. So it was my driving force was
Mhm.
I have to see her graduate high school
Yeah.
and hopefully walk her down the aisle and all the other things.
Well, let's jump to kind of the happy part of this, which is how the treatment that you went through and the process that you went through, which included meditation and probably eating the best you've ever eaten in your life and things like that, right, had a positive effect. And as of uh, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, two and a half, you 1 year ago, you were anointed cancer free, correct?
Yes, I
Yeah.
was. I mean, they say that, you're cancer free when you have your surgery and it's all out of your body, but I still had another year more of chemo to go.
Yeah.
So I had a year and a half of chemo, three or four surgeries. So really, for me, it didn't feel like I was anointed cancer free until I was completely done with all of my treatment and I received, there's like these super specific testing that you can do that will say if you have any circulating tumors in your body that, and I get those quarterly, which is always an anxiety ridden experience. But when you get the no evidence, you just pour yourself a little champagne.
Yeah, you take that, man. It's a
And
win. It's a win. It's a
heck
huge win.
yeah,
Yeah,
you celebrate.
and it goes back to that, that original goal of wanting to walk your daughter down, her graduation, her high school graduation, which she's got a number of years to go. And so it's all positivity. Okay,
Yeah.
let's take another pivot. So for before all this went down, again, like you just said, there was a whole lot of experience from you from being at executive level, working with Lee Steinberg, things like that, right? So now after all this football watching that you've done over all these different years, you through some maybe it was through part of your meditation or something like that, you're going, hey, wait a minute, there's a void out there that's missing, and I feel like there could be an opportunity that we could tap into, and the opportunity is a little company that you started up called Champera. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Champera.
Right. Okay. What is Champera? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, it really started, Mark, during my treatment, 2.5 years, I was so sick. I joke, it's not a joke, but I joke that if there's a list of 20 side effects that came with chemo
Yeah.
and cancer treatment, I had 19.
Yeah.
But one of those was that I couldn't look at screens. I
Yeah.
was way too sick, which is bizarre. So I got really good at listening to audiobooks.
Yeah.
But that meant that for 2.5 years, I did not watch a football game.
Mm.
I listened to the Super Bowl while I was laying with my eyes closed, but I didn't watch a football game. So last season, when I was finally able to come back to the game, I sat down and I was so excited. And I looked at the game and I was like, what in the world is going on? There were different rules. I didn't know a lot of the players, and it really felt like this disconnect that I felt. And it was at that moment, not precisely, but throughout the season, that I realized, man, if this is the way I feel and arguably knew more about the game than most people after spending 20 years in and around it from both broadcast and on the agency side, what do women who, the tens of millions of women who are watching this every weekend, what do they feel like? Because I know they don't have the education that I had, the experience that I had. And there was this moment where I thought, man, this is such a cultural thing in our world where people gather together and there's tailgates and watch parties and Super Bowl, family gatherings, office conversations where women just feel left out. They, because they don't know it. They feel like they just never got the playbook. And I thought, well, I want to help women. I want to help them feel connected, feel confidence, feel like they belong. And so that was the idea for Champera. And I created the first, it's called the football fluency method, which is basically, yes, teaching the game of football. That's the vehicle, but it's also creating this sense of belonging, this sense of confidence. And as opposed to teaching it like a rule book, I use sort of my signature style, which is I love humor. I love to laugh.
Yeah.
I love storytelling. And women just learn differently than men, right? We're more visual. So it's basically like if you were to sit down with me and have a great glass of wine or a cup of coffee, and you said, okay, teach me this game. And I'm going to teach it to you in a way I would teach my very best friend.
Hmm.
So that's what the mission is, and it's fun.
Yeah. And have you launched?
We're launching right before football season, so in about a month, which is early August.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So August 2026, just in case somebody
Hmm.
is listening to this podcast, it's out there in the URL will be what?
Champera.com. So Champera, I think it's champion era. So I am entering my champion era. So
I
it's
love that.
Champera.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's very symbolic, right, of the battle well, really the experience that you've had in the past, the battle that you've gone through, and the void through meditation and other things that this voice has come to you saying, there seems to be this gap. And usually where great opportunities show up is when there's these gaps
Yeah.
that there's something that it's almost there and it's kind of there, but it's not really. And that's where a lot of times that people adopt them and then off they go.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's this inspiration. And my goal is to create this huge community of people who are fun and have, like-minded intelligence. Because what I'm learning as I've been talking to all my different friends is that, I mean, it's my oncology surgeon, my breast surgeon. She was like, I need that. One of my good girlfriends built a multi-million dollar sports company, and she's like, I have no idea what's going on. And so it's not a gap in intelligence, that's for sure. It's just this gap in teaching in a way that is relatable, and that's what's just it's so fun to be able to create this community and do something positive with the next chapter.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram. Just my Amanda.Gunville is my new Instagram handle that I launched. So it'll be fun to see it grow purely organically over the
Yeah,
next several months.
love that. Love that. Okay. Well, listen, you are a bright light. You're doing great things, and it's always fun to see people have overcome what they were facing, what they're battling, and to have a positive effect in the world out there and shining that bright light, to other people. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that you made your documentary. I found it so incredibly inspirational. And, just having these conversations with people is anyone who doesn't know about podcasting, it is no small feat. It is very hard. So thank you for all of the work that you do. It's a thankless job, but we all appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that a lot. All right, everybody, there she is, the one, the only Amanda Gunville. There she is.